It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Terry Belke has been a photographer and videographer for almost 25 years, and he's been producing outdoor television for nearly all of that time. His beginnings in that field were in fishing and hunting shows, and that has evolved into environmental education programs in 2002 with the weekly series Empire Outdoors. Terry Belke's current series, Two to the Outdoors, has been running for 5 years and has been nominated for several awards on state and national levels. Please join me in welcoming Terry Belke.
Make sure I get the right order here. First, I want to thank Dr. Noonan for inviting me here, and I'm very happy to be here. And I'd also like to say how honored I am to be among such a great group of panelists, and it's been very inspiring to be here today. I'm going to approach my talk today not as much from a scholarly point of view, but from the point of view of the ecotourist itself, albeit a very fortunate ecotourist because I get paid to do what I'm doing. I often think of something I learned from a Catholic nun, Sister Mary Jonas, who runs the Response to Love Center on the Buffalo's East Side. She has fed thousands and thousands of people in the time that she's run the mission there. And a few years ago, she related to me a story of her getting to meet Mother Teresa. She traveled over to India to meet Mother Teresa and wanted to be able to establish her mission and work with Mother Teresa there. She was disappointed upon meeting Mother Teresa to be told to turn around and go home and look at what she's got right where she lives and to minister to the people there. And when she told me that, I've always taken that to heart, and I keep that in mind in my work and feel that it's been really very inspiring. The strict definition of ecotourism seems to often involve travel to remote and fragile destinations, often involving guides, and they're frequently very expensive. While ecotourism forays lead to greater understanding of the planet's connectivity and raises awareness of the environment, one need not travel to go far away places to gain insight. In Western New York, and indeed across this amazing state of New York, there's much to see and learn. And the added benefit is that it can be a relatively inexpensive pursuit for those of us who live in the state. You don't need an experienced guide. Ecotourism in the region can be a largely self-guided pursuit, and one that is accomplished with a little research and some self-motivation, which a lot of times I find is very satisfying in itself. There's also the added benefit of keeping our money within the state. And by helping in that way, we keep our own home green and hopefully lead to protecting more of our natural resources here in the state. And this obviously applies to anyone who lives anywhere. Ecotourism in New York is already growing. Birding alone attracts almost 4 million people and generates over $1 billion of revenue a year in this state. For many of our smaller municipalities that may be struggling economically, that money is a godsend and could be a buffer between development and nature. There's a lot of information in books and online, and you can do it all at your own pace. In addition, many of the state's parks have fascinating visitor centers, and that can continue your education as you experience the habitat firsthand. As you travel around New York, you may also find new locations beyond our borders as well, and many are not too far away. As a wildlife photographer and producer of outdoor television, I've had the great good fortune to be able to explore and document locations across New York, the Northeast, and Canada. And today I'd like to tell you a little bit about a few of the places I've found most fascinating. So I'm going to, I'd also like to say too that one of my really fortunate aspects of my job is to be able to inspire people to get out and look at what's around us too. And to be able to do so in my home state and the surrounding region. I've also been able to talk to many people who share the same passion that I have for New York. And I hope to inspire you all to experience these for yourself. and perhaps find some new places on your own. And I guess in some ways I address the students out here directly too, because I know a lot of you are on limited budgets too, so this is an easy way to get out and really experience a lot of what we have in this beautiful state. So my first location, my first destination here is Panama Rocks. It's a little bit south of here in Chautauqua County, and we have 3 such rock cities in the area. There's one in Olean and there's one near Ellicottville. But this one is my personal favorite. I've been going here for years. And rock cities like this have been formed by glaciers passing over the land millions of years ago. Panama Rocks is pretty easy to find and visitor friendly as well. The present owners live on the site. They have a minimum impact on the location. And they're always happy to provide explorers with maps and information. There are clearly marked trails throughout, and the rock formations are nestled in a beautiful forest, which also has some ancient trees growing there. In particular, a couple of 300-year-old hemlock trees that are really magnificent. The rock city is one that begs to be explored. The formations are towering, and you can get interesting angles, views from many angles, both above and below. You can wander through some wider cracks and crevices, but some of the trails get a little claustrophobic too, and a lot of times you'll end up at a dead end, so you've got to go back and start over again, but that's one of the wonderful things about exploring it. As many times as I've been there, I've also found something, I've always found something new, and of course that's a prime excuse to keep going back. The park itself was established in 1885, so it's pretty old, and it quickly established itself as a favorite tourist attraction, which it remains to this day. As with many natural wonders in our region, though, I'm always amazed at how few people have experienced this little gem. It's definitely one to explore, and if you've had the good fortune to already have been there, it's always a great one to rediscover. As I said, it's such a complex little area. There's always something new. The other rock cities in the area are well worth the effort as well. There's Rock City Park in Olean and Little Rock City near Ellicottville. I have not been to the one in Olean, but I've been to Little Rock City, and it is a bit of a challenge to locate. It's on a back road outside of Ellicottville, but it's well worth it. And although any hike through there is exciting, I can say that a night hike can be particularly exciting. Another small formation which is also little known, but it's in one of our big, really well-known parks, Allegheny State Park, is Thunder Rocks. It's, as I said, a smaller formation, but it's equally beautiful. And the added bonus there is that you get to explore the beauty of Allegheny too, which is well known for its wildlife and its scenery, and is really an amazing park. My next stop is right here in the city, and it's along the Niagara River, which obviously to those of you who are familiar with the area, really magnificent, both the upper and lower rivers. Niagara Falls obviously gets a lot of attention in the region, and rightfully so because of its incredible power and beauty. But the surrounding area has been, the way the surrounding area has been commercialized, I hardly can consider it really an ecotourism destination, and so many have visited there that it really doesn't need to be mentioned here. But the rest of the river, however, is more than worth exploring. And there are areas along the lower river that are quite wild, and once you get there, you can really forget that you're even near a major population center. This time of year, there's also a lot to see. Don't discount the winter time. It's well worth it to bundle up and brave the cold. Birding on the river during the winter is challenging but extremely rewarding. There's great birding throughout the entire year, but the winter is a little bit even more interesting because there's fewer people and you can really see some unusual wildlife birds there. Starting on the upper Niagara, you don't have to really go far from the city of Buffalo to see some really amazing winter populations. This is a great example, tundra swans up near Grand Island. The river was named in 1996 as a globally important bird area, and with good reason. Since the river stays unfrozen throughout the year, it attracts scores of different species from around the globe. Gulls in particular are attracted to this incredible waterway. Up to 19 different species of gulls have been sighted here, a number unlike almost anywhere on Earth. They can be seen on the upper and lower river, and a couple of the most significant species here are the Bonaparte's gull and the herring gull. Reports have shown that up to 25% of the entire Bonaparte's worldwide population come through here during the fall and the winter. These birds are impressive migrators. Their breeding populations are far north in Alaska and northern Canada, and they winter as far south as Mexico. Herring gulls are present here in numbers up to 14% of their global population. Their beauty and graceful flight belie the misinformed notion that they are garbage-eating scavengers, and nothing could be farther from the truth. Viewing them is pretty easy. There are a number of areas along the upper river that are great birding spots in the winter, and the foot of Ferry Street and the foot of Ontario Street in Buffalo have easy access, but a little exploring can easily turn up more. It's not all gulls, though, and as I mentioned, one of the most magnificent winter visitors are tundra swans. These big white swans are really stunning. These are also far north denizens, breeding in the Arctic and northern Canada, and they migrate south in the winter, and the Niagara is an annual destination. They're very vocal, and that makes them makes them a little easier to find. It seems often you hear them before you see them. And one of the best places I've found to watch them in the winter is Beaver Island State Park in Grand Island. And I've had the good fortune to see large flocks in close to shore, and it really makes you forget how cold it is out too. My next location is in central New York, and it's kind of a moving location. This is a little bit of a challenge to find sometimes. And sometimes you have to be a detective in finding what you're looking for. Not all of our most fascinating ecotourism opportunities are standing still. And a great example of this are the migrating snow geese, and winter and springtime are prime times in New York. The Finger Lakes are usually a good area to track them down, but it's not always that easy. Last spring, they were not too hard to find. There was an enormous flock on Canandaigua Lake in the Finger Lakes, and that took up residence there for a couple weeks, and the smaller flocks were found at Montezuma Wildlife Refuge to the west of Canandaigua as well. These geese breed in the far north, Greenland, Alaska, Canada, and as far as Siberia. They fly as far south as Texas and Mexico for the winter, and we are fortunate here in New York to play host to these large, striking birds. In my opinion, there are few sights more beautiful than seeing snow geese, and nothing I could do to shoot these birds could do any justice to seeing them in the flesh. They're very vocal too, same as the tundra swans, and to experience hundreds of thousands of snow geese in one location is unforgettable. I found that a good way to track them down from afar is to use some technology. Online, there are a number of good servers, bird sites. My particular favorite one is called GeneseeBirds.com. It's a local one. It's very popular with birders who submit sightings of birds throughout western and central New York and even Canada, sometimes several times a day, so it's easy to keep track of the movements of geese when they are in, and all birds when they're in the region. And they can sometimes, snow geese can sometimes be found in Niagara County, and from what I've been told, they are starting to head a little bit more west now, so occasionally you can see them in western New York too. An interesting fact about snow geese is that their populations, which were declining in the early 20th century, are now recovering at impressive rates. They are so numerous that they are starting to do damage to the Arctic tundra and are affecting other native animals there. Fortunately, they don't have the same effect on their wintering grounds here, at least for the moment. My next stop is also in central New York. The Finger Lakes are a beautiful place to explore. So we'll take a look right now at two of the region's most beautiful attractions, and speaking of ecotourism, both of these really benefit the local economy. Many of you are familiar with New York State, are familiar with Watkins Glen. The area is known for its world-class racetrack, but in my opinion, that's the least interesting attraction. The village of Watkins Glen is nestled at the southern end of Seneca Lake, which is the largest and deepest of the Finger Lakes and offers numerous places to explore, but Watkins Glen State Park here is truly a gem. The centerpiece of the 1,000-acre park is a glacially formed gorge that drops over 400 feet. It's about a 2-mile hike with about 800 stone steps carved into the rock. And so it is a workout too. But it leads through one of the state's most surreal landscapes. You truly feel that you're in another world. There are steep walls that overlook green pools. There are stone walkways under showers of water. There's placid streams, and there are 19 different waterfalls in that short 2-mile hike. And everywhere there's a sense of having stepped back in time. This is a place that deserves repeated visits, and again, as I mentioned with Panama Rocks too, each time you will find something new. It's truly one of the state's rarest and most beautiful jewels. Now, just to the northwest of Watkins Glen on Cayuga Lake lies one of the lesser-known waterfalls, Taganic Falls, and this is it right here. The park here is a marked contrast to Watkins Glen. Watkins Glen tends to get a little bit overrun with tourists, but this one's a little more placid. It's very green and very peaceful. The falls are actually set far back from the park entrance. There's a well-marked trail about 1 mile long that takes you through a placid forest in anticipation of Taganic Falls, and the final destination is really well worth the effort. Falls are one of the highest east of the Rocky Mountains, and at 250 feet, it's also 33 feet higher than Niagara Falls. But it's also very rain dependent. Obviously, I hit it on a good day when we had some nice rain. So depending on when you go, the falls can slow to a trickle, or when it's really flowing, as you can see, it is really quite magnificent. So there are a number of other impressive falls in the Finger Lakes, and these are just a couple to whet your appetite. They're great reasons to get out and explore the Finger Lakes in this region. The next location is something a little bit unusual and bears mentioning because it needs to be protected right now. It's the old Seneca Army Depot on Seneca Lake, and it really is a study in contrasts. The depot was a weapons repository during World War II and the Cold War, and there are even rumors that nuclear weapons were stored there at one time. It's 10,000 acres, and it's surrounded by a 24-mile fence. So what you're seeing are essentially captive animals, although there is no real interference with them. And the enclosure, the 24-mile fence enclosure, has ensured that the existence of the existence of the largest herd of white-tailed deer in the world. They are a leucistic strain of deer, meaning that they lack all pigmentation except their eyes, which are dark, as opposed to true albinos, which lack all pigment. The enclosure around the land has allowed the normally recessive genes to become more dominant, and inbreeding has helped the white-tailed deer proliferate. Out of over 800 deer at the depot, over 200 are white. Scientifically, the herd is fascinating, but they have a mystical feel about them as well. Seeing these graceful white deer really is a unique and uplifting experience. It's almost as if you're seeing the true spirit of nature embodied on Earth, and it's something that cannot be seen like this almost anywhere on Earth. As I mentioned, sadly, the deer can only be seen from outside the fence right now, although certain times of the year, especially during the rut in the fall, they're pretty easy to spot. And unfortunately, the public is no longer allowed to get inside the depot, despite the efforts of a local group called Seneca White Deer Incorporated to change that. The founder is Dennis Money. He's been fighting tirelessly for years to protect this herd. And he's proposed an ambitious ecotourism center for the site, and it's been fought by developers and the Seneca County IDA. Dennis considers it to be a perfect opportunity for one of our first and ecotourism centers in the state. It's really, if it's built, it would represent a unique chance to add a true ecotourism destination in New York, one that would attract scores of visitors and blend perfectly with its green surroundings and preserve the natural heritage of Seneca Lake and the surrounding Finger Lakes. So if you are interested, he does need help, and they have a great website called senecawhitedeer.org to learn more about this. They're entering a critical point in their history, and public sentiment right now is helping their cause. He's done a lot of, gone around a lot and given speeches about the situation. This is Dennis right here. If the land is developed and the fence is removed, the herd will not only be dispersed, but because of their color, they'll be easy prey to hunters and other predators, and this unique habitat will be lost forever. This land is also home to many bird species and is an Audubon-designated important bird area. So we really stand to lose a lot if this land is allowed to be degraded. And again, this is something that the public can help and take responsibility for and really help protect this area. I'm including this one, again, there are captive animals here, but I also believe that part of ecotourism is to inspire, and this certainly was very inspiring to me. As a TV producer, I have the benefit of getting to get a glimpse behind the scenes at a lot of places most of the public doesn't get to encounter, and it really is a privilege, something I never take for granted. Some of my favorites are wildlife rehabilitation centers, and there are a number of these across the state. The folks who run these are selfless, dedicated, and deeply invested in the earth and its wild creatures. Many of the animals that are treated in rehab centers are unable to be released back into the wild and thus become ambassadors for the earth, going out into public programs to teach and inspire. Hawk Creek in East Aurora is particularly close to my heart, and I'm privileged to have become one of their family and a board member. But perhaps the most unique I've found is this one right here. It's the Adirondack Wildlife Refuge in Wilmington, New York, near Saranac Lake, right in the heart of the Adirondacks. It's set in the woods at the end of a long dirt road, and the location itself is inspiring. This is a rehab center that is open year-round to the public, and its most fascinating tenants are 3 wolves. 2 are Cree and Kishka. This is Cree right here with Steve, one of the founders. They're hybrids. And the third one, Zebi, is a full-blooded Great Plains wolf, which is a subspecies of the gray wolf. This is Zebi right here. The wolf has been the subject of debate in the Adirondacks for decades. They were once native to the region, but were hunted to extinction in the Adirondacks by 1890. Much more is known today about the importance of apex predators in the ecosystem, and the debate about reintroduction to the Adirondacks is continuing. There are many in favor, but many groups still oppose their return for a variety of reasons. And reintroduction of the species out west has proven to be a boon to ecotourism and could do so for the Adirondacks as well. Much of the myths surrounding these incredible mammals have been dispelled over the years, so perhaps there is hope we can see them in New York once again. In the meantime, you can get a chance to experience wolves firsthand here at the Adirondack Wildlife and Rehab Center. Owners Steve and Wendy Hall offer wolf walks on a daily basis, and I can attest that it's a truly amazing experience. Being able to walk that close to these magnificent predators is both an honor and a humbling experience. It's also a chance to see that a lot of the misinformation about them is just that. Even these captive bred wolves are afraid of humans, and you can see it especially with Zebi right here, who wasn't interested in getting anywhere near me and my camera the entire time. And he was very leery, although the other 2 were a little bit less so. As an ecotourism destination, this is one definitely to experience, and of course, you get the benefit of being up in the Adirondack Mountains, which are New York's most impressive natural wonder. And there's so much to explore there, you could really spend the rest of your life doing so and see things, new things every time out. I am going to take us a little bit out of the state right now, and again, this is something that even people around here are not really too familiar with. Herds of eastern elk once roamed much of the Northeast, but they were hunted to extinction. The last one recorded was shot by a hunter in September of 1877. Another species, the Merriman's elk, was eliminated about the same time. And ironically, it was a population explosion of Rocky Mountain elk in Yellowstone Park that brought the species back to the Northeast. Officials in Pennsylvania imported elk from out west in 1913. And though the herd struggled to gain a foothold for decades, they are flourishing today. The best place to see these huge mammals now is in Benezet, Pennsylvania, about a 3-hour drive from western New York. And that small town is finding that ecotourism has many benefits as people from around the world come to see these incredible herds. The town and surrounding area are actually a protected haven for the elk, and no hunting is allowed there. It's about an 8-square-mile radius that they're protected, although there is hunting outside of that radius. So this makes Benezet a prime viewing spot. The best time of year to see them is during the rut in the fall, but a little diligence can produce results any time of the year. The elk can literally be found anywhere and everywhere, and when I visited there, I was anticipating the usual challenges involved with photographing wildlife, but within 5 minutes of being inside the village limits, I saw a huge cow walking through somebody's backyard, and it didn't end there. I saw whole families with calves and a full-grown bull with an enormous rack on someone's private property that I just rudely pulled into somebody's driveway and followed at a good distance him for about 5 or 10 minutes. He was very gracious to let me shoot him too. There's a new and impressive visitor center in Benezet, which features interactive exhibits, viewing areas on the property, and a fully furnished farmhouse available for rent, and there's a lot more. This is a great example of how ecotourism benefits the surrounding community, and it's right on our doorstep. And it's also a great example of how we can right the wrongs we've visited on the environment. Now I'm running a little short on time here, so I'm going to skip to my last one. Which is one of our most beautiful and again, another little-known one in western New York. Oops. The Eternal Flame, this is last but clearly not the least destination on this short list of things in New York State. This, to me, is the epitome of the sacred in nature. And in a region with more than its share of natural beauty, from the incredible power of Niagara Falls to the great splendor of Letchworth Gorge, perhaps the most fascinating is one that is not so immense. This one is tucked within Chestnut Ridge Park. And Chestnut Ridge is kind of an average park, beautiful in its own right, but the Eternal Flame Falls is really a simple natural phenomenon, a natural gas leak underneath a waterfall that just happens to be burning. And it's not even eternal in the sense that the flame is always there. Sometimes it goes out and it has to be relit by the next hiker that finds it extinguished. But if you hike back to the flame and you trek the quiet green trail that leads back into this hidden wonder, you'll soon understand why this location is revered by those who know it. It's one of the few remaining natural areas that we find on our planet, in our region. It was once called the Shale Creek Preserve, and it was run by the Buffalo Museum of Science, and it was designated a wild area, and we're really lucky to have forefathers that put this kind of place aside for us. And it's a very special place in particular. So I'd just like to end to say that I could go on and on talking about the myriad opportunities, and if Mike wasn't timing me out, I certainly would. But we have incredible opportunities here in New York State. And in preparing for this, I went back through the many stories I've produced for my series, To the Outdoors. And I kept finding locations that I had forgotten. The list could be endless, and I've only been producing these features for about 10 years. The most important thing for anyone who experiences the green wealth we have here is to spread the word, and I particularly direct this at the students here. We are all ambassadors for the environment. We're all responsible for inspiring others to share our experiences and thus kindle the spark that will burn in others as it does in us. The time has arrived that we can no longer take for granted the bounty and the beauty that nurtures us. No one here needs to be told how critical the balance is on the planet today. So it's up to us all to take up the mantle of responsibility and protect what we hold dear. Thank you.